It's an interesting experience to try and break through the noise online or on Steam or in any other store, but to break through the noise at a convention can be especially insane. So we've brought together some of the best for this topic, all of whom have done very well demoing their games at various events. And we're going to start the introductions. You can see all these wonderful people sitting up here. So we'll start introductions to my left where there is nobody, with Ben Burgh and his game Breadwinner from the Georgia Game Developer Association's Boston chapter. So Ben, please introduce yourself.
Hey, so I'm here. Breadwinner is interesting because it was made for a software company who says to promote themselves specifically at conventions. So I'm going to talk about the design thoughts that went into that.
I'm from Finite Reflection Studios, and our company is making a game called Twin Cop, which is a co-op twin-stick shooter where two players control the same person.
Okay, I'm Robert Wahler. I have a one-man indie game studio here in Atlanta. I have a game called Sinker. It's a minimalist puzzle game. And for the last 2 years, I've been promoting it on the local circuit, doing MomoCon, doing DreamHack here in Atlanta, and having some success.
Yeah, some success.
I'm Alex Turbyfield. I'm a lead artist with Hella Velvet. We're making a game called Voice Ball. It's like foosball but with your voice. We've been showing it off mostly in the South, but around the U.S. For about 1.5 years now.
I'm Ninrak of Nora Limited. I'm working on Elemental Rift. It's up to 4-player roller game where you're fighting for unlimited power, and I've been showing at events all the way back since 2004, back when I was working on Crystalline Cauldron, so I've got a good bit of experience as well as even professionally working for a company where you would set up booths and such for events.
Excellent. So with this panel, we specifically lined up people who have, while they're all indie devs, have a variety of different type of games and goals at conventions. Obviously, we all want eyes on our games at conventions. That's like about the most important thing that you can get out of them. But very different games, very different approaches, and all have been pretty successful with it. So I wanted to address this panel basically in stages. So we're going to begin with the before convention preparation and start moving into the convention, and then the part that often gets dropped, the after convention. What do you do once you've left the floor? So let's start with the pre-convention. I mean, this can be from the moment you register for it. What do you start doing? What's the physical preparation? What's your online preparation? How do you get the game ready? That's about 15 different questions in one. So Kartik, take it away.
All right. So there's a lot of, like you said, there's a lot of things that go into, like, right after you have submitted to attend at a con, and this is assuming that you are already, like, in, or that you paid and you're, like, ready to go, you know that you're going. If it's in state and you're planning on driving there, there are a lot of things to worry about. I recently had the experience of having to deal with out of state, which have y'all... Okay. I wasn't sure if I wanted to, like, go into that and let one of y'all handle that, but I'll just go ahead and say, like, one of the things that I immediately learned I needed to handle, beyond obvious travel things, like renting a car, buying your plane tickets, finding accommodation, all that regular stuff that you're used to when you travel, you also have to figure out, like, how the heck are you going to set up your booth when you get there, because you probably don't want to ship your TV, you probably don't want to ship anything, because that's not going to be time nor cost effective. So we discovered the best thing that worked for us was to hit up the nearest Walmart near the airport, buy a number of things, aka, I'm not saying I stole them, I'm saying we bought them, but we certainly returned them right after the con, because we definitely didn't need to own 2 TVs, 3 chairs, and, like, a tablecloth in Austin, Texas. So that worked out well for us, but if you are staying in state, then you have a lot less things to worry about, but you should still ask yourself, like, what do you want to bring? Is your game, in our case, our game is a couch co-op game, and we recognize, like, if it's a game played by 2 people, we don't want them both sort of, like, huddled over one small computer screen, so we brought only TVs, and we set up our laptop plugged in via HDMI behind the TV with controllers only sticking out from the TV so that all that a person sees when they sit down is controllers. So we thought about all of that stuff going into it, and that's just setting up your booth. But then, of course, you have to be there too, so you want to make sure you have and solve convention build to take there. And one of the things we always at our studio we talk about before every con is what is our objective for this con? Like, what do we want to get out of it? And every con is different. Like, one con will be like, hey, this one section of the game is kind of unpolished, and we're just not sure whether or not the jokes are landing or whether or not the mechanics in this section are balanced. So let's take everything before it and shorten it. Let's take everything after it and shorten it. And let's put the end stop right over here so that we can make sure that they spend as much time as possible in the section that we think needs the most work. As long as you have good supporting elements surrounding it, and that's not horribly, horribly buggy, you should be fine to set your game up for something like that so that you can get eyes on what you need to get eyes on. Because cons are great for exposure, but they are also really, really good for playtesting. So if you can set your build up to focus on what you need eyes on, and make sure you pay attention when you're there, but we'll get to that about while you're there, that can be helpful.
Robert, going into the event.
Going into the event, okay. I've done several local cons here, and that's certainly, like Kartik said, if you don't have to cart your gear there, it's certainly much easier to drive it there in your car. But, you know, one of the things I like to think about is what is it you're going to show? What part of the game are you going to show? And it depends on the game. Some games are really, really easy to show at a con, and I think my game in particular, since it's very easy to pick up and is a casual game, it's very easy to show. But if you have a game that's, say, an RPG or something, you have to decide, you know, what slice out of that game do you want people to play? Because you're not going to get people to sit down for hours there. So you need to really pay attention. What part of my game am I going to show? And so for an RPG, like, you probably don't want to do the character creation thing because, well, that's interesting. It's not going to give people something they can get their teeth on right away. So I would pick something that was more exciting that's part of the gameplay. So that's kind of how I look at the pre-workup, is to make sure that I'm going to show a part of the game that's really easy to show at a con and that really gets my point across.
All right, Alexander.
Yeah, like it's definitely good to know, like especially if you're traveling, you know, like the dimensions that you're really talking about with your booth. We did All Control GDC, and they were very specific up front while we were talking about getting into the event about how much space we were going to need, voltage requirements, stuff like that. It's good to know, you know, if you need to bring your own like power strips or if they'll provide those, power cords, stuff like that. Yeah, again, like what you're going to bring, you know, if you're traveling out of state, it may be a little bit tougher to bring like a bigger monitor or anything like that. Another thing to think about is sanitation, really. I mean, like if you're at a place with a lot of people coming by and like, you know, touching your controllers and stuff like that, that's a lot of germs that are spreading around. So like if you have you know, some hand sanitizer or some like wipes to like just wipe off your controllers and stuff like that, like people really appreciate it. We learned that pretty early on. Like we had one person come by and they were like, "You have hand sanitizer?" And we're like, "Oh, we forgot it right now." It's like, "Okay, I'll come back later once you have it," kind of thing. So it's good to have up front.
If you're doing VR, do not forget the wipes for the goggles.
Yeah.
Do not forget them.
Another thing, our game is a little bit unique in that the controller is using your voice, and because of that, you have like some sound pollution kind of issues. So it's good to know like where your booth is going to be for us specifically. And that's a really specific case, you know, that may just be us, but like a lot of times, you know, you want to know like, are you going to be like, you know, in a tight group where it's like people are going to be crowded around your table, or are you going to have like a little bit of breathing room, stuff like that. Other than that, kind of like what you said, we played around with like do we show the character creation? A lot of times we've opted out or like just skipped over it because a lot of times it's just time that you know, less time spent in the game, especially for something like our game, more social. It's a very contagious kind of game. Like people kind of draw people over. So the quicker we can get people in and playing and making noise, the better. So we've done that. We've made specific builds, keeping in mind difficulty. Some of our levels get a little bit more difficult later on, and if they're having to learn the control scheme right then and there, it may not be the very best thing to play early on. So, a lot of times we start them out with earlier levels, or we keep the later levels, but we scale down the difficulty, stuff like that.
All right. Well, for preparation, one of the most important things I've learned the hard way from is checking out if they have union staff for setting up your booth. Because if you're displaying in a state that requires it, Georgia luckily is not one, but some states do. That can be a big, surprising extra little fee that you were not expecting, and for a lot of indie developers, you can't afford a couple extra $100 or even up to $500 just being put on to you that you were not budgeting or planning for. Also, as mentioned, your wattage, your if you have internet connection or not, whether you need it or not, all of your basic necessities, finding out the space you need, how your neighboring booths are separated, if they're separated. There's been some where you're just a whole line of tables all right next to each other. There's been some where you've got entire segments separating you from your next booth. And knowing that information can help you plan not only how you will design your space, but how to be friendly to those who are next to you if you need to be. So if you, for example, are like my game where you've got 4 players on each machine, you might not want them sprawling off into your neighbor's section because your neighbor may not like that too much if they are not even getting their full space. Aside from that, knowing your table dimensions, knowing if you can set up above the table or not, any additional information that's going to be unique for your unique display to help your game stand out. Looking into that, researching it, also researching the place you're showcasing is very important, knowing what kind of audience, what they're there for, such as when I go to MomoCon versus DreamHack, I've got very different audiences, and I need to tweak and tailor what I'm going to show, what I'm going to emphasize, what I'm going to research for each of those conventions specifically, because they are both very extreme cases against each other, and it helps me understand both spectrums at different times and different builds and really get key areas to focus on.
I'll make a real quick addition, or sort of building off of a point that both of y'all brought up, which is being aware of costs when you go. When we got into DreamHack Austin, we were like super psyched because they were like, "Hey, you got free booth because you won an award." And we were like, "Whoa, free!" And then I was like, "Oh well, yeah, we got to think about travel costs." But then the part that I, kind of glossed over was things like electricity. When they said free booth, it doesn't include free electricity. It doesn't include like car rental. It doesn't include, like all the other things involved with going to a different state to show your game there. And the other big thing that I also keep forgetting about is like when you go to a con, unless you can really find a good amount of time to do this, chances are you're going to be eating out a lot. And in our case, when we went to Austin, we were at the Austin Convention Center, which is right smack dab in the middle of the city, and anything that you can walk to ain't cheap. Whereas, like at the very least here, when we go to like the wherever we had MoCon, there's some relatively affordable places you can get to very nearby there, and a lot of us have cars, so we can drive if we need to. But when we went to Austin, we were like, man, we're spending a lot of money on food because we don't have the time to cook anything at our house that we're staying at, and we don't have time to like grab a bunch of snacks and like just stock them underneath our table, which is also a good idea if you can find the time to stock snacks. But that was another last bit I want to add in there.
Ben, suggestions from the breadwinner since we're talking about food. Well, for anything really convention prep oriented.
So I would like to add that you should always get there early and plan for things to go wrong, especially if it's your first time, because things will go wrong, and you want to make sure you have time to resolve those before people actually start showing up.
Going, especially if you haven't demoed an event before, thinking exactly how it'll go from when you get there and set up to when people start coming in. What do they see? What do they experience? Why do they want to interact with your game and you? Additional preparation things we always have to take care of. We have a lot of inventory. We go to an event, games that we're selling, as well as computers and the like. Have an inventory that you manage and keep track of, so you understand what you're not leaving the computer you actually brought along behind. And for us also, for keeping track of sales. is a major part of it. The one other thing that I will talk about in order to segue into my next question is also make sure you reach out to any fans, friends, family, suckers in the area who might help you out. You will really want the support of anybody you can get out there. Yes.
And press.
Well, that's the next
Okay.
question.
Oh, sorry. I
That's
wasn't
the
want
next
to
question.
jump here.
Before we go
Go
into during the convention, I want to add one more thing. Bring backups. Not only a USB, because sometimes your build will go wrong on one computer, but your controller's going to break. Extra microphones if you're using voice, just all those extra power surges, everything, because something is going to break, especially during the show instead of before or after.
And I may be old school, but print out your damn hotel reservation and your car rental information. Print them out. You don't know when your phone will die, your computers will not get internet, and everything else will disappear. And you'll be so happy to have that physical copy. All right, so let's segue. So the idea of reaching out to friends, family, supporters, fans, and suckers in the area kind of segues into how do you promote before you get to an event? And this is one of the things which I see a lot of indie devs really failing on. You can't just build it and expect them to come. You have to go ahead and somehow get the word out. We already know the basics of Twitter, Facebook. LinkedIn is actually surprisingly effective in some way. I know some of your Instagram crazy. Obviously, now we have a lot of streaming going on to build up to events. But what other things do you need to do? So, for instance, my company, HDI, does have an existing fan base. So reaching out to them is critical for us to have any kind of success at any event. And Kartik, I'm going to keep jumping. I'm keep one person on down. So, Robert, you want to address this? How do you prepare ahead of time?
Yeah, right. Well, actually, the event itself is one of the best marketing things that I do for my game, is actually being at the event and meeting people in the press, meeting people in the community, meeting the players. But before you go, you definitely should have an email list of press people. Try to get the email list from the promoter itself, and they don't always give it to you, but you can ask anyway, and sometimes you'll get it. So if you can get the press list from the promoter, you can send out a blast to all these people using your personal email if you can, and tell them you're going to be there, tell them what game you're going to bring, tell them the awards you've won if you have won any, and try to get them interested in coming by and talking to you while you're there at the convention. And maybe you can get an interview, or you can get some sort of live stream thing, while they're there at the convention itself. Are we going to talk about banners and promotional material
Sure.
at some point?
Let's go to that next. The physical accoutrements.
Okay.
Alexander, getting the word out.
Yeah, so really, I suggest starting early and just being very aggressive about building a community around yourself and around what you're doing. Let people know what you're doing, but also help out. I work with a lot of different organizations around Atlanta and the Southeast in general. So a lot of times when I go out and do things, I tell them that I'm going to this event, and we just I talk with them and be like, hey, can you kind of send the word out through your channels? And a lot of times they're happy to do so. Before our events, a lot of times we try to, beef up our social media a little bit more, like our Instagram and our Twitter. Actually, one of the most random things happened on a gamer Facebook group that I was on. Like, someone posted something about, hey, I'm going to be at this event. And I was like, hey, I'm here too. Come on by. Not expecting anything from it. But they came over and they brought, tons of people over. And they even talked to us about a lot of other events that were going on that we should check out and stuff. So it was one of those random kind of things that, like, it may not work for everyone, but it worked for our case. So, just keep pushing yourself out there and, seeing what works for you and what doesn't.
One thing I would say, and this kind of ties back to doing your research about the convention before you go, is planning for and preparing for that type of audience, looking at what type of interests they have. Do you compare the trailers I've done for each event? They have very different tastes. They focus on very different key elements. And just making those trailers not only gives you more footage to show at your booth when you're there, but we'll talk about that when we're talking about at the booth. It gives you more practice. It gives you more of the mindset of okay, I'm going to be at this show. I want to show this type of thing. I want to have this mindset. this is what I've gathered about what their crowd interest is, and build around that. Also, for other ways of getting the word out, building up your mailing list, which you'll also be doing at the event, but reaching out to them. In addition, remember those who are talking about your event and spreading the word as well, and return the favor, so they'll be more likely to help in the future. And I would say the last thing that I'm able to do, because I also stream on Twitch, is just mention it on my channel every time as the event builds up, or in the case I've been lately of whenever I do stream, I have to mention the next event because I've been kind of machine gunning from event to event to event and hardly getting any time to squeeze in new content. But just telling your audience, keeping track, reminding them every so often that this is coming up. Let's get excited about it and let them tell their friends and give them time to know, because even if they can't go, they might have a friend who is in the area, and if they mention it, that friend might be able to go, and it just ripple effects all the way around.
Yeah. All right, disembodied voice up in Boston. What words of wisdom of getting the word out before the convention can you share?
So, you need to build a fan base early to spread word to. And a good way to do that is, it's just like basically the same thing as networking. You want to get people, you want to reach out to people who play similar games and try and get tips from them and try and share our fan bases. Because we're all indies, we're all in this together.
Also, just make sure that you don't promote too early. Like, start early. Start as early as you possibly can, but make sure you're also paying attention to their channels and that you're not stepping on any of their announcements, because they may want to make some announcements on your behalf. But yeah, beyond that, other random tidbits that I've learned. A lot of times cons will send you media to include in your social media releases, so be sure to include that when you do, because it can look nice. Not only will it look nice, you use media that they have sent you in any of your promotional pushes, also please them, and honestly, it's a mutually beneficial relationship, so you should be doing things to appease the people who are giving you and or giving you the opportunity to pay for a booth at a con. So yeah, you wanna be conscientious of those things.
Yeah, be pleasant to people who are giving you the opportunity to show off your game, because you never know if it's best if they're wanting to have you back the next time. And also, working up to the event, if you're nice to them and working with them, they may be a little bit more willing to like promote what you're doing a little bit more, which is nice.
Yeah, and also tying into that, especially for the newer events, if you can start getting the word out, helping them with any setup, because everyone has to start somewhere. They don't know everything right off the bat. Anything or any information or any networking you can do, I have seen it paid forward many times where you register for booth, help them out, be there on their first day, and help them through anything with whatever you can. I have personally seen it return the favor in whether great location, promotion, special benefits, all that. So reach out, help them any way you can, and even if not, they're going to remember that for future events when they have to make a tough decision.
You need banners, and I suggest you have two banners, because even if you don't have space for two, 6-foot tall, 2-foot wide banners at your booth, you could put one at the door, like at Southern Fried. We stacked our banners outside in the hall so people could see we're all in this room back here, and then by our booth, we'll have a 6-foot tall banner. And you really need to pay attention. They're not expensive. Vistaprint, you can get it for $20 for the vinyl and $40 for the stand, which you can reuse over and over and over again. So that's really, a pretty cheap thing. Another thing I like to do is to make a small mini setup, so you can put them in a backpack. A 10 by 8 glossy from Amazon is $1.80. Glue that to cardboard, put some dental floss on, and you have a nice little A-frame. I can show people later. I actually built some of these. You can put them in a backpack right next to your laptop or your tablets and carry it around. Good for GDC, things like where you have impromptu places to show off a game at a tabletop.
Yeah, so I would say as far as like promotional materials, well, one, yeah, this print is great for getting a banner. It's super cheap, like affordable. Get one. It shows off your game. You know, if someone's across the room, it gives them something to look at, to know that you're there, so they may come over. It also adds a little bit more legitimacy to what you're doing, which is really nice. So yeah, pop-ups, you know, a larger monitor if you can, like, and this comes from, and so we've had like the small laptop setup before, and like sometimes people didn't even know it was a game, especially when we had microphones connected to it. I had one person come by and place their laptop next to mine and start working, and it's like, sorry. But yeah, stuff like that. We've worked with trying to do some promotional material that stands out a little bit more. So I've done logos on magnets before, which, you know, nice things to hand out that hopefully like people will take home and remember. And it's like, you know, we were thinking magnets, they could put it on a refrigerator that might, you know, they might remember it a little bit more than like something else. But business cards are good to have that have, you know, just your social media, ways to contact you. Other things to keep in mind is what makes your game unique and what best sells that at a live setting. So for our game where we're using microphones and sound, we started experimenting more with using mic stands, just to add a little bit more theatricality. When we have the opportunity to do so, we also have used projectors rather than screens. Gives it a little bit more of a party kind of atmosphere that works for us.
You really need your mic. I keep thinking this.
Yeah.
Why don't you have voice ball on your mic?
We've talked about it. So,
right.
Yeah.
I would say if you have a full table to yourself, some conventions do, some don't. Sometimes you got a split table. But if you have a full table to yourself, I recommend looking into one of those table length banners as well. Identify this whole space is for this project. This is the area where you're going to get to see. You aren't going to see anything else. It helps also prevent things like people coming down and setting their laptop. I would also say if you've already done a few events, remember some of the things that was most important or most vital or most eye-catching from your previous events and use those for marketing material because those be your most sellable and accessible promo material to sell at a convention. I would also throw in look into unique merchandise because the posters, the T-shirts, the buttons, they're done by so many people that you don't really get enough people. But my most successful one and the one I made the most profit on at MomoCon 2015 was the book. They were the only ones that were making profit, and I think they made enough to almost offset the cost of all of the other merchandise I made just by doing simple little bookmarks. No one else was doing it, really popping out, and you couldn't even find bookmarks anywhere else except for 3 other booths in the artist alley. So it's something very unique, and it was a space where I can put in a lot of facts because I want to focus on the characterization with the more casual focus of what I'm working on. And it was something I could really make unique. I would also throw in TV toppers as just that little extra touch to help make your screens look a little bit more professional, a little bit more polished, a little bit more of a pop. When someone looks into these, oh, this even has a display. This is, and it's all matching together. It helps bring that picture further together.
Ben, what should folks have at their booths?
So, you want to draw a big crowd because a big crowd will draw a bigger crowd. And Alex touched on this a bit, but I would have called it viewability, but yeah, whatever he said was a great point. You want to you want to like draw a competition, get people involved into it. Having people either going head to head in voice ball will do it. You can also just if you have a single player game, you can like have a high score attack, try and have a prize So whoever has the best at the end of the game, and try and get people coming back, draw bigger crowds to see high level play.
That we ever took Twin Cop 2. I made little shirts with our company logo over here. They were like super simple, really, really cheap to make, and they look really professional. You look like you're a legit person who's like there to show your stuff. And prior, I don't know, I did one con prior to making those shirts, and I remember every now and then I'd like try to get people to play my game, and then they would, and then they'd stand up, and then just sort of look around, be kind of confused, and then walk off. And I realized, oh, they're looking for the person who made this game. I was right there, but they didn't realize that was me. So as soon as I started wearing the shirt that had the logo of my company, which was also on my branding, they stood up and they immediately looked at me and they were like, "That guy's in charge. Let me talk to him." So I highly recommend wearing shirts. It not only can advertise you from a distance if you do it right, like Rob did. It can also make you look more professional and like a legit game dev person.
Well, it's a good conversation starter too.
That too.
You're in line for a hot dog and somebody sees the back of your shirt, and then they start talking. So it works.
And that's something that I definitely want to do in the future as well. Is like he's got his shirt, he's got his game on the back of his shirt. So like literally, if someone's looking at it and they see, oh, that's an interesting looking graphic, that kind of interests me. Let me start a conversation. That could be really helpful. So I'd say yeah, definitely wear shirts. Things to hand out and things to give, all good ideas. I know Nrak's great idea of like handing out bookmarks and that kind of stuff is really inventive. Anything that you can think of to separate yourself from the crowd, because the crowd is doing business cards, the crowd is doing buttons. Not everyone's doing magnets. Not everyone's doing. We did cards when we went to GDC. That worked pretty well for us because we had some people walk up to us and be like, "Hey, I got 2. Got any more? Because I heard there were 8." So that was pretty fun because we did that very intentionally. It had like a number in the bottom of the corner that said like 1 out of 8 or 2 out of 8 or 3 out of 8. So when someone got one, they were like, "Ooh, there's more of these." I'm like, everyone has that collection desire. Everyone wants to complete a collection as soon as they start one. So that worked out well for us.
There actually 8 or
we joked about that, but no, there were actually
There was
8.
no 4.
The nice thing about that was it also let us sort of better give back some of the love that some people gave us at conferences. So if we ever had someone stop by and play our game and they were just getting into it and they really loved it, normally we'd only give out 2 trading cards per person, but if there was someone who really loved it, we'd say like, "Hey, why don't you have all 8?" And they were like, "Oh, I'm special, yay!" So that can be a good idea if you have something to give out to make the people feel like, "Oh, I'm a fan of this, and this is a fan of me as well." And to the point of bringing banners, banners are a great idea, but more than just bringing a banner, make sure you design your banner right. You have to think about a lot of things when you're looking at your banner. Eyeline is really important. I've seen it overlooked in a lot of things where I'll walk over to someone's booth, I'll look at their game, and I'll be like, "And the game is called that down there. Why did I have to look down to see your game name? I'm at about this height. Most people are at around a certain height, so put your game name at that height." And I think what you mentioned, like you can see these banners from a distance. What you can really see from the distance is the top of them most of the time. So what we did was we put a weird and noticeable tagline at the top of ours, which says 2 players, 1 cop, which when people see it from a distance, they're just like, what does that say? And then they walk over and they're like, "Oh, Twin Cop." I'm like already here. I might as well check it out, you know? So we have that at the very top. We have our game name right at the very middle center at around eyeline, and directly beneath that is the tagline that actually explains the gameplay. So people see that, then they see that, then they see that, and they're like, "I'm sold. I want this." So they come and play the game. So those are really a good idea. And then beyond that, you want to be respectful of people around you, but at the same time, if someone's not looking at your booth, they might be hearing your booth. So if you have anything that is potentially interesting on your main menu that will catch someone's ears as they walk by, that can also be helpful. So we always have, like, in my opinion, some really, really great music. I can say that because I didn't make the music. It's really great music on our main menu. And so when people walk by, they hear it and they're like, "Oh, that kind of caught my attention. Let me play this game."
All right. So the one thing I'll add on the bookmark point of view, because I know a few people in here are table developers, when you actually do a print run of games or books, it is very common for the printer to be very willing to throw that in for free, bookmarks, cards, etc. So take full advantage of that. When we do our booth and we are selling our books, the printers will just send us bookmarks like mad of our artwork, and 95% of people who visit the booth will take home a bookmark because we're just giving away, we're not charging for them. So they don't want my business card. well worth it. All right, so people are now at your booth. They're involved. What are you trying to accomplish with them? And what's the main takeaway you want for them? And this is a good segue also into competitions and tournaments. So let's start with Alexander, since you're doing a great job of pulling people over to your booth.
Yeah, well, if we're doing it right, the booth is pulling people over itself after some time. So I mentioned a little bit before about a kind of contagion kind of thing of people attract people kind of thing. That's very true in with the game that I'm working with now. Originally, like I'm the type of person that when I'm going around and just trying games, personally, as a fan, I personally like to just try the game, and I've never like the developer like right over like my shoulder like tell me every single thing kind of thing. I like to play around and just try things and stuff. And a lot of like early on, I kind of took the mantra of like just stepping back and letting people kind of play the game, which I still like. There's also the problem of when you're using a controller that is less intuitive or the gameplay is less intuitive if you've never seen it before. A lot of times in our case, people would come up and like go up to the mic and like, especially if they're shy, like be like, "Ooh, ooh," and kind of walk away. And that's not great for attracting a crowd. So a lot of times I kind of worked on my carnival barking, as it were, like getting people over, but then like having that like quick spiel about like what your game is about, like what this is, how you do it, give them a couple of techniques for how to play and how to be effective, and then just letting them go. If they're struggling a little bit, give them some more hints and stuff like that. Non-intrusively, just push them to let them have the best experiences possible. Because when people are making noise with our game, especially like these weird noises that people like to make, because like the idea is that people like you want to bring that theatricality out of people, like that performative spirit. So when people start doing that, other people, hear it and see what's going on, come by. And once that happens, not only are they attracted to the game, but they're watching other people play the game. They're being trained on how the game is being played just from the other people playing. So after a while, I don't need to say anything. People are just, and like I learned that after a while. It was just like, I would go up and be like, by the way, this is how you play. And they were like, I got it now. It's fine. So yeah, it's like they the crowd kind of attracts the crowd and
For me, it depends on what purpose I'm going to these events for. Something like Siege, for example, it's much more of a business expo than it is a convention. So I'm having a very different focus than something like Southern Fry, where everyone there is a gamer of some kind. They have a huge love for gaming, so it's not going to be as business oriented as it is going to be gameplay. Let's have fun. Let's do wild things and go crazy. So you got to figure out what purpose and what focus do you want for your event first off. Secondly, where do you want them to go from there? Do you want them to go to your Steam page? Do you want to sign up for a mailing list? Do you want them to just give you feedback? Figure out your plan, and that's part of your preparation, but now execute on what it is you want to do at that particular event. Every event is going to have a different focus, and the less you have to say per customer, the better, because by the end of the weekend, your throat's going to be gone anyway. So you're going to be hating yourself if you have to, and this has happened before, talk over arcade cabinets that are right next to you, shouting, giving this long spiel, explaining every little detail, and then by the last day, the last few hours, your voice is like, here's a sign. Can you just read this instead? My voice is gone.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Another reason to have the hand sanitizer, because you're probably going to shake a lot of hands, and so after a while, you're probably going to be using it yourself.
And take those voice ball sponsored throat lozenges after you're done yelling.
Also, have plenty of business cards and be ready to give it to every single person who plays, whether they had fun or not. Just be sure to hand it out. Even if they drop it off at the next booth they walk to, that's free advertisement for you, because your card is sitting somewhere else and they're saying, oh, I haven't checked that out yet. I'm going to have to remember to check that out after they finish playing whatever game they're playing. So every little bit, and it's based on whatever your plan is. And without more specification, it's hard to direct beyond that. But
Marketing
figure
through littering. I like it.
figure out what it is your goal is and build upon it from there.
All right, Ben. Customers at your booth. What are you trying to get them to do, accomplish, etc.?
So I don't have very much more to add to this. Just make sure you already have an established online presence, website, Twitter, or something. Or if you're already on Steam, you can direct them there. Just make sure they have somewhere to
And
go.
I'll go ahead and take on the
when they
perspective
look-
you're
when they
actually
look up
selling
the
your game at the event, especially for those of you in tabletop. The idea is to attract, engage, and convert to a buying customer, just like the whole mobile spiel. So you really want to have that on down. Attract them on over, engage them. It's very hard to sell without engaging and convert them into a paying customer, and then they can take the bookmark home so you can retain them and they can order online. But sales are the goal, so you're definitely trying to interact with them, find out what their interests are in gaming, and ensure that your game meets that and is a suitable solution for their gaming needs.
Yeah, I have to say, attract. What was it? Attract, engage, and
convert.
Convert. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
For mentality going into a con. I think one thing I'll talk about is as the representative for your game. I think your body language is really important. Every now and then I'll go to someone's booth, be interested in what I'm seeing on the screen, but be intimidated by who's behind the screen. I'm certainly not. I spend a lot of energy when I'm interacting with other human beings in general, and so when I'm going to a con and I go up to someone's booth and the person's standing there like this and like staring at me, and I'm just like, game looks cool, but I don't feel like talking to you because that stresses me out. So I'm just gonna go there where the developer is sort of just like sitting by the side and like not really intimidating to me. But every person's different. Some people actually need you to go out of your way to get them to come to you. So I think in addition to you making sure you have the right body language, you need to make sure that you're reading other people's body language. Don't like walk up to someone if they are showing you the body language of someone who doesn't really want to talk to you, because you might end up driving away a customer who would have been interested in your game otherwise, and vice versa. If someone's walking by and they glance at your screen, they're just sort of like maybe like just vaguely interested, and they don't look like they're gonna freak out if you approach them, then approach them. Be like, hey, you like what you see? Or hey, do you like, in my case, co-op games? Hey, do you like whatever? And see if this is something that they want to stick around for and participate in. So make sure that you are being inviting with your own body language and being inviting with the way that you approach people, because when you're at a con, you don't have the ease of like thinking really hard and long about every single thing that you type on the internet when you're like, trying to sell your game through your Steam page or anything like that. You have to like be able to see someone, assess their behavior, and figure out like, all right, what can I do to make sure this person feels comfortable coming over to my booth? But in an ideal world, I think one of you said that your booth should be bringing people in and by itself. Like if you're seeing people coming up and playing your game without you needing to go out of your way to get people, you're in the gold. If you feel like you're struggling to get every single person to come and try your game, then you might need to revisit something about your booth. Maybe something about your booth isn't as attractive as it could be.
One thing to add on to that about body language, make sure not just you, but your helpers are not hiding behind your table, not looking at their phones for 14 out of every 15 minutes, and make sure they know as well to be out there, be open, and be helpful instead of just relying on you, because you got to make sure your helpers know what to do as well.
Stand up. If you're sitting down, they don't think you want to engage.
Right.
And,
Yeah, don't sit behind your booth all day. Really need to be out there in the aisle and engaging people. I'm kind of the opposite of Kartik even. I'm just going to riff on the body language and talking to people, but I will talk to absolutely everybody that walks by, even if they're not looking at me, because that's what you're there for. And people really don't mind it, really. If somebody's got their eye on the bathroom and they're making the beeline, I'll leave them alone. But everybody else is fair game. And I'm the typical engineering nerd at home. I'm not the people person. But when I'm there, the carnival barker idea, you have to be that way. And it's actually fun. Most people that are there to play games, to look at people's games, so engage them. Say hi. Hey, you like puzzle games? And that starts the conversation. Either they do or they don't. If they do, well, hey, I've got one right here. And people enjoy that. And it works. if you're expecting people, no matter how good your promotional material is, to just come and sit down and play your game, you're going to be disappointed. You actually have to engage with people in order to get your booth full and stay full.
And your game is the best because you made it.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
yeah, I mean, like on that note, like you wanna be like, it can be exhausting, but you wanna be happy. It sounds kind of like a weird thing to
Happiness
say,
is
but like
exhausting.
it is exhausting
It
to
is.
smile for a 3-day conference all day. But having worked in retail and in the restaurant industry growing up, like I learned the hard way. You don't get tips if you're not smiling. You don't get good customer service if you don't treat you well if you are. How can I say, like it shouldn't be a customer service job when you go to sell your game at a conference. Like you feel like you've done all this hard work to make this great game. Why do I have to go out and like be like super chirpy and nice to everybody? Unfortunately, you do, and you do have to like just sort of like I've gotten some people stop and just like have no filter and just say like the rudest thing to me, and I'll just be like, I'm sorry you think that. Have a nice
Well,
day.
people are there to play a game, and if you can't get excited about your own game, how are
Yeah.
you going to get other people excited about it?
The smiling thing, like a lot of times it's a feedback loop as well.
Yeah.
Like, if you're smiling to them, like they're having a better time, so they're probably smiling back at you, so you kind of feel better. Also, silver lining, like, as a game developer and stuff like that, I spend the majority of my day sitting behind a desk. So it's nice actually having a weekend where I'm up on my feet. Like, I'm tired, but it's like, hey, got some blood flow down to my legs. That's
All right, 2 more questions. These are going to be short ones. After the con, what is the most important thing you should do after you sleep, or even before you sleep? Then right.
Sleep? What's that?
Yeah.
First off, all the press that spoke to you, contact them back. All those business cards you collected, get to those right away. Don't forget about them. Don't slouch on them. Just reach out, do your mailing list. Just go through all of that contact information that you went through the whole convention to build up for. Now it's time to act on it. Whether it's reaching out, thanking people, just go through everyone, get it done and over with, and then you can call it over and start building for your next show, your next build, whatever.
Boston breadwinner. Number 1 thing you should do after the con.
So after the con, you've been up all day, you've been talking all day. You need to take care of yourself. Take a good shower, get a good night's sleep, eat a good meal. You gotta remember that it's fun making games. It's great to make money, but what kind of life
Excellent.
are you living?
So after you've
if
taken care of
you don't
yourself, I
take care of
recommend
yourself?
a debrief, even if it's just to yourself. What was right about your booth? What was right about the con for you? What did you mess up at the con? The same for your game. What feedback did you get that was important? And you need to write it down before you forget it and don't incorporate it. Get that sort of stuff processed, preferably daily at the show, but certainly the day after the show at the latest.
Add one more thing. Do it before you start tearing down your booth, because sometimes looking at the way the booth is will help you jog your memory.
If you do it daily, that's great.
Yeah, I'd say like responding to anyone who you talked to at the con, because at the con you should be doing networking as well. If you talk to anyone who is a PR person or a streamer or a YouTuber or anything like that, reach out to them before they reach out to you, because that looks very professional if you do. Obviously, do make sure you take care of yourself, that you don't, like, right after one con is over, start planning the next one, because cons, whether or not you want to admit it, will take a lot out of you, and you want to take care of yourself in the interim. Besides that, I don't have too much more to add other than we did this for a while, and honestly, I fell off the wagon a bit because I've been really, really tired doing these things, but I really wanted to keep doing them, which was we would record a lot of video footage and take a lot of photos during our time at a con, and for the first like 4 or 5 cons we went to, we edited together a quick like travel vlog of like what happened while we were at the con, and like pictures and videos of people playing and enjoying our game, and something promotional to post after, because like you lead up to promotion and then you have to post something promotional afterwards to be like, hey, this happened, and if you weren't there, here's what happened. It can be a nice little thing you can add in at the end there.
Right. I think everybody's already talked about contacting the press after you've gotten back with the con, but don't neglect your developer also show your game. So while you're at the con, make sure you play everybody else's game. Take some time away from your game go play everybody's game, collect their business cards. So when you get home on that Monday, you've got a stack of business cards. You tweet at them, connect with them on LinkedIn, connect with them on Twitter, because these guys are as good as press. These are your friends. These are doing the same thing you are. They might have tips. They may know people. It's networking. You really need to pay attention to the other developers there, not just.
And Alexander, I actually have your video here. Is that what you're going to talk about? Edit a great video?
Sure,
So
yeah.
we're going to hide Boston for a minute, and we're going to take a quick look at.
Yeah, like
editing your video.
yeah, edit videos, all of the above from what people said. Contact people that you got their cards, their information from. Definitely talk to the other people who are showing off their games, because they have their own, kind of microverses of people that follow their games. We learned about cons very specific to what we're doing, that we're like, we hadn't even heard of that. Like, yeah, we're definitely going to that next year. Stuff like that. What I do also is, I do quick social media searches for like people who may have, posted something about our game. I remember NVIDIA, like, threw up something on their Twitter and stuff. So it's cool, like, getting, finding those and then like commenting back on them, seeing if you can open a channel there. As well, do a postmortem with your development team, even if it's a development team of yourself. Talk about what worked, what didn't work for your game, what works specifically for showing off your game live, because there can be differences. We went from a point-based system when we were showing it off, where it was like first to 5, I think, to a time-based approach, where it's like you had a certain amount of time, and then whoever had the most points won. Specifically because we found out, like, people, if they see the timer, then there's that little bit of extra like incentive to keep going, where it's like, oh, but I can bring this back and stuff like that. So we definitely use it as an opportunity to kind of discern what people liked about the game, what they didn't, and then what we can implement into the game in general, but also implement into the game and our booths moving forward.
And the other thing I'll add to that we always did was to target particular fans we thought were in some way particularly above and beyond the norm for us. Maybe they spent $500 to $1,000 at the booth in one visit. For them, if there was something back at the warehouse we hadn't brought to the show, we'd have gotten their address, for instance, and mailed them some small thank you thing. If there's someone you think can spread the word very well, reach out to them immediately after, send them some sort of goodie. We have online codes, all kinds of free things we can send now. So something to give them something after the event to think positively about your company as well. So last question, and the one everyone came here for, favorite convention story when you were an exhibitor. So I'll start this one. And unfortunately, we are an all-ages stream, which means I cannot talk about the first 10 years of our convention experience, of my convention experiences. But I will talk about just how enthusiastic you can get some people when they try your game for the first time. So tabletop, it's very difficult to run games for everybody who comes by, but you try and engage them. One of the best experiences is always getting someone who's never tried your game, maybe not even liking that genre type of game, engaged to it, becomes a massive fan. I remember one kid at an Origin tried out our game for the very first time, just a simple walkthrough at the booth, fell in love with it, basically spent all the cash they come there to spend on everything else at the booth, still had a couple things they wanted, kept coming back to the booth and buying more. That was it. They buy a few things, go back, read them, come back, and have to have this one, have to have that one. So that by the end of the convention, he was very literally talking about giving blood so he could buy the things that he hadn't already, that he was out of money to buy. So needless to say, at the very end of the show, he got a couple of those to go home with so he didn't have to pass out or give the kidney, which is our suggestion, was just sell a kidney. But anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I'd have to say
All ages.
Yes,
all ages.
yes, of course. I think one of my favorite stories was actually just from this most recent DreamHack Austin, where these two guys came by to play the game on the first day, and they really enjoyed the experience. They had a really great time, and they kept saying, "Oh, we're gonna be back. We're gonna come back. We're gonna come back." And not only did they come back, they brought some friends, which was really nice of them to do that. They brought some friends. They got some other people to play it, but then they, on their own accord, organized a speed run competition around our game that we had not planned for, that we had not told anyone or said that we wanted to do this. Our game's not inherently designed for proper good speed running, but they were like, this game's so much fun, we don't want to stop playing it. There's no more content for us to play, so the best thing we can do is see how fast we can go through what you have. And so they came back, I don't know, 3 or 4 times, and they just kept they were sitting there when there was no one else at our booth. They were sitting there and they were just strategizing about every little mechanic that we had in the game. They were like, "How fast can we do this?" And they'd turn and ask us questions like, "How did you code that one thing? Can we move if we do this? Is there a there? Can we do that?" They tried all these things, and I mean, out of the people who we've had who've been super fans of our games, they were more engaged and more at our booth than anyone had ever seen before. And it was really encouraging and inspiring to me as a game developer to consider that as an avenue for us as well. So that was good.
Videotape those moments if you can.
Oh, yeah.
That's great stuff.
Yeah.
Videotape, sorry. Record.
I don't have any funny stories, but I'll impart one last piece of wisdom that I learned at Terminus, which was just a few weeks ago, is know where you're going. So the awards night, the last night of the show, it said Plaza Theater, and I thought that was a room somewhere in the hotel. And I thought, okay, I'll get there at 7, no problem. I know where the hotel is. Get there, nobody's there. I'm thinking, oh no, what did I do wrong? I didn't bother to read that it was the Plaza Theater, which is 2 miles away down Ponce. So that was, it was so know where you're going. That's a good idea.
Didn't a famous comedian play your game at a con? Hannibal Buress?
That's true.
If anyone's familiar with the comedian Hannibal Buress, he came up to play Sinker at one of the cons that we were at together.
Oh, the Tabernacle, the mega show.
Yeah. He might have been on some things, but
You think it?
Yes.
It's really hard to pick one, just because we've had a lot of really fun, unique experiences. One small thing that I really like is seeing kids who are either shy or they may have special needs or something like that they played the game and got really into it, and their parents would come up and be like, they're normally they don't normally have this outlet, so this is awesome seeing that, which feels really good. Some fun event kind of thing that people getting really loud and screaming is really cool. One of the most interesting things that we did was Terminus last year, where we had we were part of the award show, and we had the awards banquet hall play our game at once in tandem, which you can't do with too many games, but apparently you can do with ours. That we kind of found out, while we were doing it. But essentially, we had, and I don't know how many people are in the ballroom.
In the thousands.
Yeah, it's a lot of people. But it was split up between two sides of the room, and me and another one of my partner, Steven, we got up in front of the crowd, and it's projected on this giant screen, and it was like, okay, this side, my side, that side, Steven's side, we're going against each other. I'm holding out the mics, and Steven's doing the same, and people are just screaming, and it's playing up on this giant screen. The entire room was shaking. It was really cool.
Did you get pictures?
Video.
Didn't happen. I'm gonna get that to happen.
There's been so many. It's always hard to choose, especially when you've been doing it for a while. I think my best moment was probably also the one that was most intimidating at first. Would probably be last year at Southern Fried when we had just moved over to what was originally the Microsoft room. Right across from me was Tekken 7 and Injustice 2, which had just came out just weeks beforehand. And I knew those were hot AAA games that just came out. They're in the same fighting genre. More brawler side, but it's still fighting genre. And Saturday, once these two kids, probably late elementary school, early middle school, came up, started playing, they had that magic moment where, oh, everything's coming together. They understand this, and they want to keep on playing more, and they keep on getting more excited. They're building more noise. Then other people are wanting to hop in, and they're wanting to see what these two kids are playing about. And probably about 10 o'clock, you just see about half of this room all gathered around, watching these two kids go, okay, who's next? Who wants to try and challenge us? And everyone's just like, oh yeah, Injustice and Tekken are there. That's nice, yeah. We all want to see these two kids making all this noise, making all this energy, projecting, and everyone's just kind of mesmerized watching them, and they just want to keep on watching them. And they want to keep playing against them, and I'm just sitting back going, I'm learning stuff about these characters I didn't even know they could be done.
Can I add in one last advice from just not like directly related to your story, but something that I remembered from that year of Southern Fried was initially when we got our room at Southern Fried last year, it was less than good. It wasn't exactly what we were hoping for because it was there was a different conference separating us from the rest of Southern Fried, and we were in this room off to the side that people didn't even know was related to Southern Fried. And we tried to think of all these different solutions and all these different ways to trying to get people over. The bit of advice that goes with this is that if you feel like there is a solution to the kind of exposure that you're getting at a conference, don't be afraid to talk to the conference organizer about it. We talked to Shannon DeWitt. I told him, hey, this is our situation. I feel like this isn't beneficial to anyone involved because, people aren't getting a chance to play our games, and we're not getting anyone to see that we're here. There's something needs to be changed here. We need to improve on this. And Shannon was like, yeah, let me work with you. And we figured it out, and he was very gracious enough to let us use a different room that was primarily reserved for Microsoft and Sony. And us being in that room honestly changed the entire flow of the audience at this con so much that he gave us the entire room to ourselves this year. And so, and I've had the same experience at every con that I've been to. We've always had something or the other that was like, oh, all the traffic is walking right around our booth. What can we do to solve this? I go and talk to the person who's running the con. They want to help you as much as you want to be there for them. So, as long as you're nice about it, they'll help you. And don't barge down their door and be like, I'm mad about this. Be like, what can we do? I need a little help here, and they'll be more than happy.
All right, Ben, this presentation was your idea, so you get the last cool story, and then tell everyone where they can see more about.
All right, so this takes place the first convention Breadwinner was at, the International Baking Industry Expo, which was in Las Vegas in 2016. So the booth I was at was near some of those like big industrial doors for exhibitors to load and unload all their stuff. So somehow a pigeon had gotten in through there, and he pooped over some of the equipment we had.
How easy was that to clean? That wasn't just hand sanitizer.
I wasn't there until the next day, so I didn't see how they cleaned up.
And on that note, tell them where they can find
I
Breadwinner.
heard it was a mess. So Breadwinner is on sale on Steam right now for the price of a loaf of bread.
Find all my things linked at andrewgreenberg.com.
Yeah, just search for Twin Cop. There's one and only.
Right. My game is Sinker. That's Sinker without the E, S-I-N-K-R. It's a dollar game. Hour and a half playtime, 2.5 hours. It's on Steam and all the mobile devices.
My game is Voice Ball. We're still in development. You can find us on Instagram, Hella_Velvet, Twitter, Velvet Hella, YouTube search just Voice Ball. It'll just probably be the first page.
Website is www.nrutd.com. Everything else is in the process of being built together. I've just been doing too many shows to get Steam page and such set up, so just point to the website, and things will be coming in the near future whenever I can.
All right, we've run kind of over. Usually we'd go for some Q&A. Don't have any burning questions? You just want to talk to us afterward? Yeah, that's what I sort of figured. So, thank you all very much for joining us here and enjoying the pizza. All of you for joining us online, and we'll see you next month.